All right, so it's time for our tulip, which I love this flower so much. Okay, so we really want to define the kind of tip of this one. It gives our tulip the shape we want. So we've got 6 strands, which is because I wanted it to be a little bit of a bulkier flower. I wanted it to have some weight to it. So the first stitch is going to go right down through the center, and I'm kind of coming down on that line. You can see these lines on the outside, and there's a little line on the inside. That is for our other shade. That's going to kind of accent it and give our tulip some depth. So our first stitch is going to go right through the center. And then I really want to have that defined out like tip there. So I want to make sure that my next stitch is sort of below the first one. It'll just help keep the tip a little sharper. Make sure so just giving it, sorry, my knot came through. Okay, and then this one I'm going to tuck just in behind like we've done so many times before, but I want to go pretty much the full length just because this one isn't like, it's not going to be massive, so you don't want to make a super short one because you just won't be able to cover it. So just a little short of the other one. And then keep getting my knot caught, which I absolutely hate. Okay, and then this one I'm going to come down just beside, pretty much actually the same hole as my very first stitch. And I want to keep it, so we don't need a ton of stitches for this one because we are using 6 strands. So I'm going to probably end up at about 4 here. This fourth one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to tuck it in behind. Kind of creates that curve too because it stops a little shorter. It creates the curve of the tulip. Okay, and then over here, I'm going to make sure I'm coming up on the outside of that tip. Actually coming up even a little higher than I did on the other one too. I really want that sharp edge. Okay. And then tucking it in underneath. Trying to keep my stitches quite tight together along the edge here. I'm gonna have to put 1 or probably 2 along this side. So I'm gonna do this one shorter again. Just because like you can see this is sort of like a more of a leaf shape, and with 6 strands we really don't have a lot of space in the base to be overcrowding that. So okay, that one created a really nice tip on it, the point of the tulip. So I'm going to come down just behind my center stitch. And then just short, kind of along the line actually, which these outer ones will kind of cover a little bit of. Okay, and then we're going to do our center. Again, I'm really wanting to define that tip, so I'm going to come up, making sure I'm coming up on the outside. I might even come up a little extra, just since we're trying to cover the line and create the tip. I don't want to go too close. Okay, and then down beside this one, I'm gonna try to keep it as much into that full length as I can for this straight satin stitches without obviously interfering in making it too bulky in the center there. This one I'm gonna come down and in. And then for my last one, I'm just gonna really like for my last one, I'm on the center part, I am just going to tuck it in behind. Oops. On that angle. So again, it creates that kind of curved look, which helps define the two petals from each other. I find if you put the outside stitches of a petal on a sharper angle, it really helps to define and create a curved look. Because the natural look of the outside of this petal would kind of have a curve. And then of course defines each petal sort of against each other. Really trying to make sure I'm coming up in the right spot. And then I think, so because I'm gonna have a small stitch right here in the orange, I don't necessarily need to make sure that every stitch makes it all the way down to the bottom, because that orange, or like peachy orange color will sort of cover all of that anyways. Piece of hair. Okay, and then I'm running out of space in here, so I'm just gonna keep my stitches short to fill that spot. And then, like I said, I'm gonna have that little peach part. And then here we go, we're gonna do our little back ones, which I am gonna keep on quite a bit of an angle to, like I said, create the definition. And I'm really wanting to make sure that I keep them that point so that I'm not getting in it in behind on the angle, and then one more. If you don't feel like you're being as successful with your satin stitch in 6 strands, especially with these little back ones, if you're not finding that you're able to get them to sit quite right, you could drop down to 3 strands for especially, like I still think 6 strands in the front, but if you want for that little back bit, you could drop down to 3 strands. Especially if you're finding you're just having trouble keeping your stitches sort of flat. And I know that as a beginner stitcher, it can be harder to get the right angle and tension, and 3 strands is a little bit more forgiving. So if you are having trouble making it look the way you want it to look, drop down to 3 strands and just fill that in. It'll definitely have a, it'll change the depth on those back petals. You'll really be able to tell that they're the behind petals. Okay. And I'm just tucking it in behind, and then I'm just going to throw maybe one more in here. Finish this curve. Okay, and remembering that I have that orange stitch going right here, so I'm not too worried about that little gap there. And then we are done with the 350 petals, and we can move on to our 38 to 27, I believe. And it will be with 6 strands as well. All right, so we're just gonna I'm gonna start with my little orange accent shade right in this middle bit. So I'm just kind of coming down a little bit from the tip. I'm not starting at the very, very top. And I'm just going in right along the edge of where that petal would be. Just throwing in one stitch. And I do want it to kind of tuck behind, so I'm allowing it to kind of almost get lost in there. I don't want it to be gone, but I definitely don't mind if it sits not fully on top. It's kind of just supposed to be like a peak of it. And then the same on this one, just from the bottom, and just just a little accent. The bottom ones will be a little bit more pronounced, but it really sort of just defines the shape there. And then we're starting at kind of the bottom of where the petal, it's almost like an extension of, it is an extension of this petal. It's just meant to like be as if the color kind of gradually changed. So I'm going to do the first one all the way down to the bottom. And then I'm going to tuck a few kind of behind the last one, just making them a little shorter. And then my outside ones will become longer again. Or my okay. And then we've probably got one more stitch in us, and it can go all the way down to the base. Everything kind of in the tulip kind of conjugates to this center bit. Sort of creates that right at the stem, right? Just like a flower, it's like that bulb. So we're doing the same thing with our stitches. Okay, and then same thing over here. Just continuing on. This one I have a little bit more room along that spine of it, so I'm going to actually go longer for most of them. I think I have the space for all the stitches, so why not? And then got one more short one. Just want to get really close in there to the last one because I don't want it to be as obvious. It just helps, again, create that more realistic curve. It comes from kind of the right curve there. All right, so I love this tulip so much. I think it's so pretty. Okay, and then I'm kind of just fluffing up just to blend them together and make them look a little bit more seamless. Okay, so we'll move on to our stems for this one. And finally, we're done all the stems. And if you haven't done your other stems, this is going to be your time. Okay, so these cute little leaves are probably going to be the hardest leaves on here. Well, obviously, because this one's just a little itty bitty guy, but they are pretty difficult in shape. So we're going to work our way through these and I'm going to help you. Okay, so we're going to start from the tip. And I'm actually just going to go straight to the top of this line because we really need to have quite a bit of space to create the right angle all the way down. And then I'm going to come up on the side of it, just like a regular leaf stitch. This one's just like a very curvy leaf stitch. So we're coming down and I'm just going to go just below my last one. And since this is not going to be a symmetrical like leaf stitch, you don't need to worry about, a lot of the time we match up kind of like we did on our last one. This one won't. You're going to have a lot more stitches on this side. So just go along your spine and then some of them will match up, some of them won't. And the angles are going to be very different. It's definitely not going to. So you're following that line. I'm going to work on one side and then I'm going to work on the other. It's just going to keep me more focused on the shape I'm working on instead of trying to switch angles and switch direction, like switch sections. They're so different that it's not helpful. So the funny thing about this one is because if I keep going down, it doesn't really define this side of the leaf. So I am going to do sort of what I did with my satin stitch is I'm going to tuck some of my leaf stitches behind, especially on this tip part, which isn't something that you would typically do on a leaf stitch, to be honest. I've only ever done it on like a really oddly shaped leaf stitch, but it is because I need to get a bunch of stitches in there on this angle, and covering them just doesn't look quite the same. You ruin the shape of the leaf. So now I have a more clear path to get down to this line, so I can start going the full length. So basically, if you have to overlap your other stitches to get to the line, tuck them in behind, and then once you can get there without covering another stitch, you can go straight. So this one I'm going to actually tuck in behind. And then I'll be getting pretty close to being, and then that prevents you from all of a sudden being like down here, because that's what would probably happen if you were doing a bunch of stitches. Your longest one would be way down here because you do them one after the other, and you don't yet want to have all of the stitches that far down the leaf. We're pretty much on a clear track now, I would say. I might do this one just because they're literally just so close to each other. It'll help me not overload it. You kind of just have to make that, no one's is going to look exactly the same as another person's, just because your stitches will be different lengths apart. You'll have different, you can try to follow exactly what I'm doing as much as possible. But the amount of tension that you have on your needle, it's always going to look like slightly different. I know a lot of people don't like that because it's the unknown, but you just got to follow your own gut and what you've learned and hope that it's enough to do exactly. Make it look perfect. And to be honest, like, what's funny about this is I've stitched this pattern now 3 times and none of them look identical. Like, there's so many parts where I'm like, why doesn't that look like that one? I want it to look more like that one. And it just doesn't. It just doesn't. I can't even make them look exactly the same. I think I like this tulip better than the last one. I'm definitely doing a better job of this leaf stitch than the last one I did. So now you're on a nice little angle, probably creating kind of that angular leaf stitch that we know and love. And when you think of an actual leaf and you think of the veins of a leaf, there's always like that one that goes down the middle, and then there's veins on an angle coming in, and that's basically what you're trying to emulate. So we've done the same thing on this side, and we're just following the same vein and filling in all of the leaf. And as we start to get to the bottom, depending on what kind of angle you're on, and if you're not on the exact same angle as me, that's okay. It's not right or wrong, but you want to just kind of finish off on the same angle. If you feel like you need to straighten it out a little bit, if you can, that's an option too. I'm trying to kind of straighten mine a little bit so that I'm on a sharper angle as I'm coming down. And as it gets narrower, it gets a little easier to do that, as you can see. So if you can notice that I'm going on a little bit of a sharper angle, trying to fill the sides here. And then I'm just going to do one little short one to cover this little curve. And then we're all done. So it's definitely like, if you follow that line along, you're going to create the vein of it. And then obviously like your angle here. This side, you don't have to do the same kind of tucking just because it's, and then I just followed all the way down. So you don't actually have, and I am going to actually throw, now that I've, like I always say, less is more. I'm going to throw one more stitch from the bottom here, and I'm going to have it tuck underneath because I just want a nice little line there. Yeah, I think I just needed that extra. So you'll follow the same concept on this side. I'm going to come up at the tip and then come down at the top of that line. And it's the same kind of idea. Like this side, you can see you don't need as many stitches. So I'm just going to create kind of one right here to about there. And then as you can see, like this is all covered underneath here. I don't need to have more stitches, but when I can start to see that line, that's where my next stitch is gonna go. And down onto my vein. And the same thing. So just following where that line shows. And then that same angle. So there isn't a right or wrong angle. There isn't a right or wrong like way for this to look in the end, as long as you like the way it looks. If you don't, you can pull it out and try again. But I highly suggest, if you're working on it and you're like, I don't like the way this is looking, it doesn't look right, or it doesn't look like the example, I like to wait till I'm done the leaf, because sometimes it looks weird in the moment and you're like, how can this end up looking right by the end? But I would say 9 out of 10 times when I'm like, I don't think this is gonna work, it actually ends up working by the end. So have some faith, don't jump the gun and stop too quickly. I mean, unless there's something that you're like, I don't, you know, you kind of, but give yourself a little bit of time to let it try. Because I promise sometimes you will think it's not working and then it totally will. So I'm kind of trying to change my angle a little bit just to get a little bit of a sharper curve here. I want to have a long line there. That didn't work exactly how I wanted it to. There we go. So I kind of fudged that a little bit, but that's like curving my angles. And then the same thing as last time, I'm actually going to do a shorter one here. I don't want to cover because it's such a curve and I can't get to where I need to be without it covering the other stitches. I'm going to do some short ones. And then I think I'm ready to do a long one now. Probably gonna have to do another short one. Maybe a couple even. And then we'll pop a longer one in here now to cover those ends. There we go. That worked out nicely. And then I can go pretty far along and pop in some shorter ones, because again, I'm still kind of trying to come over the edge of it. Okay, and then just filling in till it's all done. I ran out of thread, so I'll need to get a little bit more, or I'm almost out of thread. I think I got one last stitch, just my one strand didn't make it in. Anyway, you kind of get the idea. I just, these ones are on, again, a different angle than the middle ones, but as long as you get that really nice vein through the center, you can really create the shape of that leaf. Okay, and then we've just got a split stitch to finish our stem, which I think you've seen quite a few times. I will come back on here and show it to you in just a sec. Okay, so our split stitch, I'm just going to start at the top. If I can get my needle in. And we're doing the same thing we've done the whole time. It's creating one straight stitch. I'm not really on my line quite right. Coming up a stitch length forward and then going back down through the stitch to split it. And the same thing from here. Splitting my stitch. And probably one last one. You don't need to go, oops. You don't need to go through here. You can just go in as far as you want. I might go, could probably go a little bit further, but I won't go in again and split that last bit. It's just not necessary. You can't really see it anyways. It kind of just blends in and it's just an unnecessary extra stitch. So we're all done our tulip, and next is our dahlia.